What's the biggest governmental duck-up of your country's history? I live in South Africa. Where to begin? It really is hard to know where to start. The story I usually tell is when the ex-president, Zuma, built a house with taxpayers' money and claimed his swimming pool was a security feature. In the event of fires, the pool was a water source, therefore it wasn't an illegal use of taxpayers' money. Just grab a bucket and put that fire out. But really, that doesn't scratch the surface of South African governmental duck-ups. My favorite is how they smashed that COVID relief fund before they could even count it. We decided that helping the Nazis was a good idea until it wasn't. Even better, it was the most craptacular jumping on the winner's bandwagon operation in history. Joining a war that was surely to be won, only to suck hard as gonads and actively dragging Germany down with us. To save our ass in Greece Hitler lost crucial time to invade Russia, with the wintry results we all know. That's like going to a place where your friend is getting laid and using him as a wingman, then failing to score with any of the girls, and being such a useless and annoying loser that your friend can't even score his own chicks anymore. In recent history, our president, first female one at that, was brainwashed since birth by a Rasputin-like cult leader, which led to a slew of influence peddling and corruption scandals. Not surprising she went to jail though, since every single president in our history has either been assassinated, sent to jail, had their family members' close relatives sent to jail, or committed suicide. South Korea? It sounds like it. My best friend's husband is Korean and he says she is a nightmare. Not sure if it's the biggest, but in Australia we had a boom in the mining industry and finally the government decided to tax the mining companies that were making massive profits. The story goes that the government put representatives of the biggest mining companies in a room and told them to come up with a tax for themselves. So they did. Of course, if you come up with a tax then you know how to avoid it. It was reported that they paid $0 in the new tax in the first year. Could be recalling it wrong, but generally speaking, expecting an industry to tax themselves at a cost of profit is asking for a screw up. Britain once managed to send a warship to Iceland rather than Ireland. Since then the RN has always written Iceland as Iceland, see, in all documents to avoid this mistake. Financial crash in Iceland in 2008. The banks put our country's debt at over 7 times our GDP. It ruined so many lives and the aftermath is still felt by people who are still in debt or have lost their pensions. Banks also asked customers a week before the crash if they were interested in putting their pensions into some index fund or something, don't really know the right word for it, and make it grow more. They knew what was happening and only used the money to save their asses. Our Prime Minister declared in a TV speech, "God bless Iceland." Then the morning after, people saw their loans, pensions and everything just either skyrocket or disappear. If you ask people how it was, you'd seriously think they'd been at Verdun. People's lives were absolutely ruined, some beyond repair. Apply that to Britain, except we still haven't recovered. In 2019 we had one quarter where GDP matched 2007 levels. 11 years later we were still in the same recession. I'm Australian, and the policy to remove half-caste Aboriginal children from their families and hand them to childless white foster parents in order to breed out their Aboriginal heritage is pretty hard to ignore. Oh, and the fact that the government were prepared to concede all of the country above Sydney to Japanese invasion during World War II is pretty concerning as well. Skullplatformen. Recently the Swedish government spent well over 700 million krona, $70 million, on a digital system for high schools, and it's pure shit. Not just inconvenient, it barely works. It's probably closer to 1 billion krona now, since they've kept working on it the past 3 years instead of using Google Classroom, like every other reasonable school would. Yeah, same here in Switzerland, where every canton has its own idea of how to do school it. And our city has decided to spend way too much on some barely working, closed source privately developed, meaning the public doesn't even own the software garbage. Malaysia. So many, but I'll just do the most recent COVID-19 duck up. Last year Malaysia was a leading example of managing the pandemic, but the backdoor govt Backdoor because quite a few MPs jumped ship from the democratically elected govt and formed another govt, decided to hold by-elections in the state of Sabah, and no standard SOPs were followed, leading to a spike in cases. We were well on our way to single-digit cases, and today we have an average of 7k cases daily. Brazilian here. There are many. I'll tell you two of the most bizarre ones. Back at 2015, while the country was entering one of the biggest economic crises on Brazilian history, our former president, Dilma Rousseff, gave 8 billion reais, about $1.5 billion, to some Brazilian contractors to build things on many countries, except Brazil. The most recent one, our actual president, Jair Bolsonaro, refused 100 million doses of Pfizer's COVID vaccine last year, told people to not use masks, and said that people who stay at home to this day are idiots. The baby bonus. In order to combat our declining birth rate, the Australian government decided to give new parent $5,000 when they had a baby. This led to a huge wave of young teenagers having babies and dropping out of school to get a $5,000 payday. Of course, most of them were totally unprepared to be parents, and the novelty wore off real quick. The foster care and child services systems became overwhelmed. Thousands of kids are growing up in bad situations, unwanted and unloved because the government didn't think it through properly. Well, I am from Kazakhstan. What can I say about my country's governmental duck-ups? They renamed the name of the capital city into our president's name, Nur Sultan, and also named every major street in every city after the president as well. They have statues of this guy all over the country. Other than that, everything as it goes in a post-Soviet country, corruption from top to the bottom. Money decides everything. Government couldn't care less about the people, you know, old good bullshit all around. Shooting down our own airline, mistaking it for an American missile, and as a result killing everyone on board. They lied about it to the public for 3 straight days. Apparently there was a massive AIDS conference that was going to be attended by some top international experts on the issue who were on the plane as well. I think you've got the wrong duck up, mate. This is about the Ukrainian flight from Tehran, not MH17. Right, I see. I'm thinking of the Malaysian Airlines one, I think. The one that happened a few months after their other plane disappeared. Everything, Italy. However, one particular duck up by the government after the reunification was developing only the north, leaving the south poor and underdeveloped. This gap still exists today, after 150 plus years. Traveling north to south in Italy is indeed something of a shock. It feels like a whole other, much poorer, country. Is that a reason why a lot of the mafia comes from southern Italy, Sicily? Edit. Thanks for the mafia history lesson, my Italian non-Italian friends. Very insightful and informative, since I don't have much knowledge at all of modern Italian history. Mafia is everywhere, if you are thinking about corruption and bribes to a powerful man that controls the territory. But in Sicily, things got worse. After the unification in 1861, some people felt like a foreign power had conquered us, instead of being a real unification. And some rebellions in the south were stopped with harsh laws, special measures and executions. So the feeling of foreign oppressors grew. In 1919 to 1920, communist parties were born in all of Italy, and people were striking against the working conditions. In the south, the big owners asked help to mafia instead of the government. Mafia profited by that and gained more power. In 1943, American came to Italy to free Europe, and everything was organized by Italo-American mafia because people spoke 2 languages. When Americans asked to speak with people from Sicily, the Italo-Americans pointed to their own family, mafia men, too. So, Americans took the power from the fascists and gave the power to the mafia. From there, mafia and corruption grew even more. And the government just didn't care. By then, Sicily was the stereotype of lazy, corrupted people, as if it can't be helped. In the 80s, mafia started killing here and there, and the general feeling was that they are killing each other, let them be. Also, it was the new norm and Italy was in general plagued with terrorism everywhere. Then, at the beginning of the 90s, a group of magistrates prosecutors tried to actually change things. They declared mafia association a crime, and arrested and sent to jail everyone that had colluded with the mafia. Even when they were killed in 1992, it helped starting to change. Nowadays, mafia and corruption is here, same as everywhere. But it's not the scary organized group of men that help people, control everything, and face no consequences you see in movies. Too off we have a duck up every 2 weeks, but I am going to tell this one. This is worth the read. Here in Costa Rica we had the concrete incident. We call it El Cementazo, which was something seemingly small that got from 0 to 100 real ducking quick. This one construction guy bought a sheet ton of concrete, cement. However, the duck it's called, he was building a bigger building and got insurance from a private company since the public national one rejected his project. It was more loss than gain and the project was big, so yeah. Time goes on and guess what? Building crumbles. Someone ducking sneezed or something and it crumbled like dust. The streets around also crumbled. Everything on the 20 million national coin project crumbled to dust, and now the insurance company was down bad. They couldn't pay 20 millions on the spot. The case was taken to court because of the impressive duck up and damage to property. Here is where we get spicy. Why did it crumble like that? It seems the concrete was awful quality and imported illegally from China. A concrete made to build houses fast for a lot of people brought to a rainy, tectonic country. It only took a bit of rain and an earthquake. Nobody felt to tear it down. How did the concrete got approved to enter if it gets monitored? The dude at the cargo let it throughout the border, just walk through the front door. Because he had higher up instructions, which himself had higher up instructions to let the guy pass, and so on and so on. In a matter of one day the whole cabinet was somehow involved on this incredibly big money scheme. By next day president and related. By night of that day people from past governments were found involved, and before we knew it they had to hire new judges for the main judging branch because this case was now involved with every single politic related person on the country and even some beyond. The case took months, and as you would expect it, nothing of really big consequence happened. Politics people are still around. I think the one who ordered the concrete went to jail and got out after a bit because he harmed himself to get to the hospital. I still wonder why is people so shy to start a ducking revolution here. I swear. Edited some typos. Who would have Tuft project has no why? Not from Myanmar, but I feel like this one is crazy enough that it needs to be posted here. Before 1985, the Burmese kyat was denominated into 1, 5, 10, 25, 50, and 100 kyat notes. On the 3rd of November, 1985, the two largest notes, 50 and amp. 100 were demonetized, declared invalid as legal tender, without warning. Though the public was allowed to exchange limited amounts of the old notes for new ones, the vast majority of the value the physical notes represented basically vanished overnight. Quick side note, this was actually the second time this happened under this administration. 1 week later, 75 kyat notes were introduced as a replacement, followed next year by 15 and amp. 35 kyat notes. 2 years later, once everyone had finally gotten used to dealing in multiples of 35 and 70, the government did the same thing again, demonetizing the 25, 35, and 70 kyat notes. Except this time without exchange or compensation. This rendered some 75% of the country's currency worthless and eliminated the savings of millions of Burmese. In the US, this would be equivalent to erasing $1.6 trillion from circulation today. A few weeks later, the 45 and amp. 90 kyat notes were introduced. The resulting economic disturbances led to serious riots and eventually a coup d'etat in 1988, whereupon more conventional denominations were reinstated, along with several higher denominations up 10,000 kyat because the aforementioned policy changes, along with many other problems with the prior administration, had completely decimated the Burmese economy, resulting in hyperinflation. But here's the truly crazy part, and why I think this is one of the greatest governmental fuck-ups of all time. The reason behind the denomination changes? The dictator general at the time was a big fan of numerology. The 75 kyat note was introduced to commemorate his 75th birthday. The 45 and 90 kyat notes were introduced because an astrologer told him that the number 9 was auspicious. Probably being allied with Hitler. It only brought us famine, and my grandfather told me they had to leave their house every time they heard planes, cause we got bombed by allies first and then by Nazis. Italy? Yes it. Australia. Our government ducked up royally when it came to getting better internet. Billions of taxpayers' money down the ducking drain. Murdoch is also a hunt for playing a part in this. I'd say in the big picture selling off the electrical grid was worse, especially the way it was done so that power generation is owned by billionaires, the transmission owned by the Chinese, and you buy the power from some billion company that provides no value added. Also selling off our telecom network and thinking it was a great idea to have one corporate entity own the infrastructure, the wholesale reseller rights to that infrastructure, as well as the retail sales channel to charge customers to use that infrastructure. And government monopolies being turned into private monopolies isn't even the worst part about it. Had the government continued to own the infrastructure and wholesale rights to that infra, they would have been able to raise far more revenue selling access to the network than what they made selling it off. Conservatives love to crap on about how good they are at capitalism, but history across multiple countries shows they really have no ducking idea what they are doing. Leaving a massive amount of ammonium nitrate in the port in the center of the capital for 5+ years that then exploded, causing one of the largest non-nuclear explosions in history. Cultural Revolution, Tiananmen Massacre, one-child policy. But what is the perception of those things in China? Can you freely talk about Xianmen or not? Asking out of curiosity because I don't know much of China. The people born in the 80s, me for example, knows very little about the square incident. My parents, however, remembered some. My dad told me that before the incident, the students and activists were praised on the news, calling for equality and freedom, you know, things that communism actually okay with it. Only when the government didn't responded favorably with their demands that they started to calling them rioters and troublemakers. My dad never witnessed the incident in person. He just questioned how can that many people just disappeared from the square in one night. Peacefully. My wife, a year younger than me, knows nothing about it. The older generation doesn't talk about it, because, well, there's nothing to say. Electing a TV star, draft dodger, tax evader, pro-Russian oligarch puppeter president. In a time of war. And also Chernobyl. It's difficult to choose one of those two events. Ukraine out. The funny thing is that I read the first paragraph and thought you meant Trump. New Zealand. The breaches of the Treaty of Waitangi using Maori slavery as a means to an end in military action despite being outlawed. Last Maori slaves died in the 1950s, the dawn raids in the 1970s and amp 80s when police would do late night early morning raids to crack down on illegal overstayers. 200 years of trying to wipe out the Maori spoken language Tereo. Despite becoming an official language of New Zealand in 1987, a speaker at a Ratepayers Alliance meeting in Tauranga was abused by the crowd for speaking 6 words in Tereo this week. Colonization of Western Samoa after WWI so authoritarian and racist they wanted the Germans to come back. The racist £10, equivalent to $1,750 NZD in 2020, poll tax to restrict Chinese immigration. Only one Chinese was allocated per 10 ton of cargo. In 1896 the ratio was changed to 1 Chinese per 200 ton of cargo, and the poll tax was raised to £100, $20,000. So in Norway we are weird look on climate change. As we are a driving force for the Paris Agreement and is therefore looked upon as a great inspiration, mitigating climate change on a great level, but we still have some duck-ups in our own nature. We've allowed dumping of mining waste in our fjords, still look for oil and gas in the vulnerable north, and we don't look for another way of earning funds for our pension program. The biggest difference made in Norway to help mitigate climate change is just as big a difference as any other first world country. Honestly, we just believe we're better without any proof due to this. Constantly allowing them to be bought out to build more coal mines and destroying ecosystems and becoming the country with the highest species extinction rate, over 100 species each year. We are literally owned by the mining industry. The government is just puppets pretending to be politicians. Then the amount of control Murdoch press has, they brainwash the majority of the population. Then not to mention we are the only Western country that doesn't have a Bill of Human Rights. Australia. I mean, we had a president that said the economy is going bad, so we'll commandeer everyone's savings accounts to help with debt, which is the reason that my mom doesn't really believe in banks to this day, and does most of her financial stuff with actual printed money. But I think the worst duck up was saying that China is responsible for the pandemic, and it's all their fault, while they are our main supplier of vaccines. After the pandemic is really with, we might investigate if that's true, or say it, but right now he's biting the hand that feeds while cheating on the food and giving you the finger. The country is Brazil, BTW, if someone was curious. We lost a war with emus. Yes, this was a real war. Yes, it reached parliament. Yes, this was approved by the Minister of Defense. Yes, guns were used. Yes, the birds avoided a tactical ambush. No, we don't like to talk about it. Too many in Malaysia. XPM started a fund, which is contributed by the people, to build the nation, but him and his family end up stealing from it to live lavish lifestyle. Then there's rumor of his wife's involvement in the murder of Mongolian woman, where her body is disposed of with C4. Money laundering, blah blah blah. Worst part of this is the government end up being unable to prosecute him, and now he has his own political party. Oh man, that C4 thing was crazy. When you really want to get rid of that annoying ex. That woman apparently helped them negotiate a contract to purchase 2 submarines. There's a rumor that she was about to blow the whistle on them working together and lied about the value of the submarine. They apparently told the government that it was twice the actual price quoted to them. This was back when he was the defense minister. As a Canadian, it's got to be government treatment of our indigenous people. The list of things done is endless, but most egregious was probably the residential schools where abducted children were taken to get abused and have their culture erased. Thousands died at the schools and records were very incomplete, so entire generations were devastated without even the closure of being informed their child had died. The abuses are unbelievable to me. They were a basic reality to those who lived it. Kamala Harris looking the other way while the priests in San Francisco were molesting young boys who attended the church. I'm a black woman, and it's nice to have strong black women as role models, but I will never stand behind her because of this. I'm from India and our current govt itself has a huge list lol. They demonetized 2 of the most popular currency notes without any notice, with no proper planing whatsoever. People now basically had worthless papers, couldn't buy meds, supplies etc. Had to stand in long queues at the banks all day to exchange notes which weren't adequate, and a lot of people went home without any. Poor people who didn't have access to internet banking and stuff couldn't get any money. People died standing in queues and so much more. Also, our economy tanked.